Yeah, so there's a couple of things. One area that I've seen, and this comes from a couple of workshops and client engagements and conferences I've been at, where then, after you've done your thing, people come up and then they ask the real questions, right? So one of those areas is communication practitioners who completely understand that crisis communication preparedness is crucial and it's needed, and in this poly-crisis environment, etc. But then recently, several people came up to me and said, "How can I convince my management?" So we see the discrepancy between, the communication profession, of course, being in tune with what is happening in the world, and knowing that they need to prepare, and that it's get more complicated. But what I'm hearing from the comms people is a couple of things. First of all, they have it very difficult to actually explain in words that C-level executives, non-communicators, understand the importance of crisis communication preparedness. So that's a positioning thing. How do you sell that ID? But then also simply, how do I get this on the radar? So that's an interesting area. And then another one that I've just been looking at more closely, because I hear so many different voices about this, is legislation. So what I'm seeing as a consultant is usually I would get in touch with, or communicators would call me, potential clients, and then we talk about things. And there's a shift that I've seen. The last 3 engagements actually are business continuity, risk management, professional crisis management professionals who reach out, not the communicators, because they always have this urgency and they talk about legislation, um, and also the ISO quality environment that has changed. So they, from an operational point of view, see that they have to actually, by law, or by quality level, have to integrate comms, crisis comms. And so that's an interesting shift as well.
So within that, you're well known for looking at AI and AI elements within kind of the crisis management, crisis communication space. What are the kind of significant issues around that you're seeing?
Well, I think overall, I mean, it goes with the trend that I think many people have looked at in the overall communications function. As a profession, we are rather conservative. I always said that we've missed the boat on the internet. It took us a couple of years to understand what it actually meant. Then we've completely missed the boat on social media. And I always compare with our marketing cousins, right? I mean, they jump on this thing and they go for it. We're much more conservative, which is normal based on the work that we do, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we tend to look at things first and then see how it works and whatever. I think that the same trend is here with AI. But for good reasons. AI is double-edged sword. You can use it for good, you can use it for bad, like any kind of technology. But the impact here is seriously at scale. But I do see a couple of really interesting AI integrations in crisis risk and emergency management, which then made the link to comms part. And what I like about it is that it's driven by the more operational people, so people with on-the-ground experience in emergency management, crisis management. They look at it with a different set of glasses like that we do. But it is interesting because that means that the operational stuff, where they integrate AI in a good way, is really solid. And that allows us communicators to simply build on that. So I'm thinking about a certain startup I'm working with in the US. This is fully emergency management. They've understood its purpose built. It's a purpose built large language model. It integrates all the steps, human in the loop at every step. It takes into account also legislation, because you cannot just send out messages just like that if they are co-edited by AI. And then it's simple. You have a platform. And then as a communicator, you look at this and you extrapolate on your communications crisis comms level, which is good because that's grounded in actual work. And it's not a communicator thinking about things and then needs to push that down. Here it's from the bottom up, which is really interesting. So that's great. And then another thing that I still see is that a lot of organizations and again communication departments, I mean, let's face it, ChatGPT and the other Gen AI systems have been out now for more than 2 years, right?
Yeah.
We had time to play around, we had time to tinker, but I still see organizations who do not have a clear set of AI guidelines. They don't have an AI protocol. What if something goes wrong with the AI we use? So those basic levels of protection are not in place in many organizations. And again, coming back to my first remark, we are slow. We had 2 years. We could have, and sure, we have our ethical codes, which is a good thing, and that is the basis for everything else. But we need to also operationalize this, and everybody is using AI, and there is a lot of shadow AI. So how come that you don't have like clear guidelines on this or clear enforced guidelines, right?
Mm.
And also a crisis plan for what if something goes wrong, and we know it goes wrong. I mean, we've seen enough stories about that.
Yeah. And what I'm going to say, I speak to a lot of communicators who perhaps aren't specifically in the crisis space, but want to be prepared, who are in very risk averse organizations who have been very slow to take up AI. Is there any advice you could give them about how to sort of highlight what it can do, highlight the issues, and sort of raise that perhaps internally?
Well, it is a technology that has risks and advantages. So already understanding actually what AI is, it's not only Chat GPT,
Mm.
what have you, and then really, first of all, if you don't actually know this, then of course follow some training, and there's enough guidance on there. But try to translate it. What does it actually mean if we push out a report to the larger public and it is AI generated, which is not an issue? That is not an issue. Did we disclose the use of AI? Did we have a certain statement around that? Do we have a certain strategy around that? Is it transparent? Then that's all fine. But don't hide it away and then come out and get caught and what have you. And then that is only one question, but then also the scenario planning. Uh, Many organizations do scenarios for what I call the usual suspects: fire, flooding, what have you, product recall, etc. Why don't you have one for when something goes wrong with the AI that you're using? And that is, and then a lot of people think, oh yeah, the scenario where I use ChatGPT and then something comes out and I've used confidential information there, that is not even the biggest thing. It's
Mm.
your enterprise grade AI system that goes rogue. I mean, that can happen, but how do you coordinate that with your supplier? What is the cascading effect? So it's much larger than just the tools that most of us see out there. It's also enterprise grade things. What if an AI makes a wrong decision? What if an AI provides information which is wrong, but then that gets integrated in an operational, I don't know, merger and acquisition strategy, and
Mm.
you know the serious stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
So training, learning about it, and making that translation from what is still for many a shiny, beautiful new object to what does it actually mean for the business or for the organization, depending on which sector you are.
And I'm going to just, while I've got you, ask about simulations because I know you've said the usual suspects and the kind of focus. Um, is your view now that we've got to change how we do exercises and simulations based on the world that we're in? Because I know you've written about this a few times.
Yeah. So that's more on a strategic level. I think the beautiful crisis plan, which is focused on what you said, what I said, the usual suspects of product recall, and then we have
Yeah.
one for, I don't know, fire, flooding, and then we have these plans. I don't think in a public crisis environment that we can still work that way.
Hmm.
We need not stepping away from crisis planning, but maybe from a fixed plan. So the crisis planning aspect, the activity of planning, is much more important than the finalized plan. I think a plan is just a framework in which you work, and we know it's the first casualty when reality hits. So the planning aspect is still important, but we need to look at interconnected crises, because we see that more and more crises are interconnected and don't follow a beautiful crisis cycle anymore. They tend to go down, but then already you have another one. So that moment of recovery is getting smaller, which has a lot of implication on learning and after action reporting, etc.
Yeah.
That translates into simulations. So more complex simulations, interconnected simulation scenarios. And then the second thing is that, of course, using AI for crisis simulations is really God-given, right? I mean, content creation that you need to create your injects, done, labeled, of course, all the time. But so it improves, I think, the possibilities that we have. I mean, I had a workshop, a conference and then a workshop in the US and in Canada a couple of weeks ago. And I wanted to change the normal agenda. And I said, well, why not do something in the afternoon that I'll take people through a simulation? Now, I don't have the budget for the major simulation platforms out there. It's just me, myself, and I, and 3 AI assistants. So we don't have that budget. I vibe coded one in 20 minutes and I ran with it in the workshop. So we are at that level where if you need a tool, and of course, it's not a fully fledged crisis simulation platform, but it was enough for people to get them into the rhythm of a tabletop exercise. It was enough for me to have these injects prepared, send them to them, record their answers, do an analysis, and all these things. So we're at this stage where we can actually do the more complex crisis simulations without blowing up the budget. Well, I see that when like you, we are crisis all the time, right? We're in this thing, and I sometimes forget myself. And then when I meet with people, I say, oh, "Yeah, it's true. I mean, you are a communication professional, but you actually have no experience with crisis, with
Yeah.
and so I think there's a huge there's a lot of room to provide real professional capacity building and training. And yes, I know, again, the usual suspects of the trainings available, but I do think that people like you and we need to look at, and you do that. I know you give training and I do training, but for overall communicators, if you don't feel certain, if you have maybe less experience, do find time and budget to follow training, because you will be faced with one or the other crisis. That is not even a question now anymore. It could be a cyber one, could be, I mean, the world is complex enough, so that will happen. So invest in your capacity, your own capacity building. That's one tip. And then the other thing is as well, talk, if you're in a larger organization, go and meet what I call the operational side of crisis and emergency management. So go and talk with your CISO, the person who's responsible for cybersecurity and things. Just have a meeting, and just that this person explains what it is, and that you can also explain what the com side of that is. If you have a risk manager, well, just go to a risk management meeting and see, okay, well, from a purely operational risk management point of view, this is what we're looking at. Because I know that is not happening. Comms people are very busy, and they have to run campaigns, and they have to do media relations, and they have to do internal comms, etc., etc. But in the meantime, there's another layer of the business which actually looks at potential risks, emergencies, crises, purely from an operational side, but the two need to connect. And I often come back to this what I saw happening when Heathrow went dark. My LinkedIn feed, which is both comms people but also operational business continuity and recovery people, from the operational side, it's incredible. You're getting one of the largest airports in the world back up and running in 24 hours. You deserve a medal. That's actually what happened. Fantastic. Look at it from a com side of point of view, and you go like, no. So it's that, but in the real world. So if you have those both functions in an organization, sit down and compare notes. It's always very valuable exercise. One thing that I mentioned is, the changing environment, and I wrote an article about that last year, and I'm writing again this week on that. The environment is changing in the way that Europe definitely, but also other parts of the world, For instance, the crisis management ISO chapter 8 is fully dedicated to crisis comms. First time. If you operate in Europe or you communicate with Europeans anywhere in the globe, there is a huge number of legislation coming into effect at the end of the year, which has an impact on communicators. The by law communications that you need to do in the context of, for instance, a cyber attack, 72 hours, 24 hours, the use of AI. If tomorrow you want to, and some organizations have already done that, and then you can have a whole discussion pro or con. But imagine that tomorrow you want to create a virtual avatar with AI of your CEO because it's simply much more practical and people accept it. Imagine that you're a very forward-thinking tech company where people say, well, I know it's an avatar, but it's my CEO. So, that's another way of doing it. Well, you have to label that. It's the law, even if it's internal. So there's a couple of implications, and I think it's interesting. It makes the work a bit more complicated because you need to, make protocols for all these things. But it also ensures much more professionalization, I think, of the integration, not only of AI, but of good structures of integration of comms with operations. So that's an interesting area. So for people listening to this and then saying, okay, I work in an organization, we're very much busy with legislation in Europe or even outside of Europe, or quality ISOs, again, talk with operations because they actually have the book, and you'll need to take that into account. So, and it will be compulsory, so you better look at it now. You still have 6 months, 7 months.